Welcome to a live episode of Surviving the Survivor. We bring you the best guests in all of true crime. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button. Here's your host, Emmy Award-winning broadcaster, Joel Waldman.
What's up, STS Nation? And we are live and running live on this new software, all being orchestrated by Space Coast behind the scenes in the lovely Los Angeles. Of course, this is Surviving the Survivor, the podcast that promises to bring you the very best guests in all of true crime. And we do it day in and day out. It is not a tagline. It is the way we live our life with the very best guests in true crime. And tonight, a very disturbing story and trend in Ohio with a quote-unquote extraordinary surge in missing children. Children are disappearing from northern Ohio in record numbers, with more than 1,000 minors reported missing so far this year alone, and more than 45 children have gone missing in the Cleveland-Akron area in September. And in August, there were more than 35 missing minors. That's according to the Ohio Attorney General's Missing Children's website. Without further ado, let me introduce you to the best guest tonight. Not only is he an active detective, but he is also a doctor. Dr. Detective Troy Loonie, PhD in Space Coast. I'm just going to have you... I'm hearing my little echo there, so we will fix that. But Dr. Detective Troy Loonie, he is a PhD. Career in law enforcement. He spent the first 20 years in uniform patrol, and now he is a detective in the Major Crimes Against Persons Unit. He investigates all major crimes such as capital murder, homicide, overdose deaths. He's even doing financial crimes now. And then we've got Jennifer Coffindaffer. Career in federal law enforcement spanned over 28 years and included extensive investigative, operational leadership and training experiences. She's a special agent with the FBI. She's also an expert in self-defense. And then we've got Scott Roeder. He is an internationally recognized evidence specialist and founder of the Evidence Room. He's consulted over 1,500 cases since 2001. He did a Surviving My Biggest Case on the Oscar Pistorius case. A quick reminder, please support us on Patreon as well as on YouTube. If you can't do that, Apple Podcasts, we would love 5 stars from you, and you can always find our stuff on survivingthesurvivor.com. And Space Coast, I'm hearing a little echo-ishness, so if I don't know if you have an extra thing to pot down, but if we can turn that off, that would be a huge help, whatever that is. Just to give some perspective here, and then we'll get into Dr. Loonie. Detective Loonie had some really great questions, but the National Crime Information Center received reports for more than 337,000 missing children in 2022. That is one stat, 337,000. But another statistic cites 460,000 missing kids in a single year. That is the U.S. Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. According to the National Crime Information Center, their annual report, there are over 97,000 active missing peoples, including adults and children. So to you, Dr. Loonie, and I don't know if you're hearing the same thing I am, but why so many missing kids, not just in Ohio, but nationally?
So thank you, Joel. And so looking at this article, specifically that came out, what comes to mind are, the numbers, the reporting, and essentially, what do these numbers mean? From a perspective of thinking of Ohio specifically, I think it talked about Cleveland, Akron, talking with detectives and looking at the process of how they investigate. I do know there are a large number of habitual reports that take place and potentially runaways. But of course, as Cleveland Chief, I believe, said, one child is too many that's missing. So ultimately, trying to identify the factors, the reason behind this, whether it be runaway or just, again, could be home life or whatever various factors come to mind. It is a report. And what I've identified for Akron, at least, is the homeless missing and the juveniles are reported, and the numbers are compiling with data in that aspect.
And Jen, I know this is an issue that's close to your heart. Obviously, an FBI agent for close to 3 decades. Same question to you. I mean, to me, and we're going to break down this 1,000 missing in Ohio. And I did some research about sex trafficking, and Ohio is among the worst states. But it's an astonishing number. I mean, they're talking about 97,000 active missing people, including adults and children, in the United States, but 460,000 kids reported missing a year. Is this primarily because of the way things are being reported, or is this a real serious issue in this country that's being underreported by the media?
I do think it is such a serious issue. I totally agree that one is too many. We want to see that people that are missing get the attention that Gabby Petito got, which is exactly what the Petito Schmidts have been pushing for all this time. It was wonderful to see Charlotte Senna have all that push, to help find her. And the miracle took place that I think all of us feared would have never taken place. So one is too many. But I will say this, today, I really dissected some of these numbers, Joel, and looked at, of course, some of the reporting. And from at least what I looked at, it looks like a lot of those numbers go back to 1920s. In other words, they really compiled a huge list of historical cases as well. And they also have solved or have found the missing children and only have 137 cases right now on the books, including adult and children. So I agree with you, Joel. It's such a huge issue. But I hope in this case that these statistics are reflecting exactly what's happening.
And I agree with you. And I saw that same figure, and it does, one of these cases goes all the way back to 1928. So we're going to get into that. And I know Dr. Detective, that's tough to remember to say, Dr. Detective. Never had one of those on our show, but we're going to have Dr. Loonie. And by the way, I met Dr. Loonie at CrimeCon, stand-up guy, great guy, and told him we'd have him on the show, and here he is. So, and Roeder, you better show up to the next CrimeCon, which is in Nashville, Scott Roeder. But Scott Roeder, I asked him
last time, so I couldn't make it. Yeah.
all right. Well, this time I'm gonna make sure you're there. You should be presenting there. But Scott Roeder, I kind of refer to him as a sort of a mad scientist, but in a good way. And he sent me a text right before we went on the show, and he said I did some research, and he took a picture of that chalkboard behind him. He researched, the issue with these missing kids, and you can see that mind at work. What do you think is the big issue here, Scott Roeder? And is there any way that 460,000 kids should be going missing in this country a year?
Well, absolutely not. It's an absolute tragedy uh, of epic proportions. I think about this in the terms of predators and prey, right? So if you look in the wild, a lion or any kind of a predator is going to try to attack a young pup that doesn't have his mom around, right? Same thing with the human predator. They're going to try to go for the disadvantaged child, the broken home child, the troubled child in school, the troubled child with drugs, the troubled child with law, and those are going to be the pups without the protection, and those are the kids I think predominantly are the ones that are going missing. The John Benet Ramses is 1 in a million in that family and neighborhood and so on and so forth. It's really the underprivileged children throughout the entire world that this happens. Now, we've got to break these numbers down a little bit. Of the 500,000 estimated, give or take, because I think the figures are hard to pin down, 97.8%, according to law enforcement, are resolved, within a week. 90% are resolved within a day. So we've got an estimated 11,000 kids that really don't get resolved on a year-to-year basis, and there's got to be some accumulation. I don't know if we have a uniform numbering system where there's where all of these kids can be listed. So I think that's a problem. But then you break down that number of those 11,000 kids, and about 2% of those kids are what's called kidnapped by stereotypical means, meaning abducted by a family, acquaintance, or a stranger. And that's a low number, 200, but that's obviously 200 too many. I think the remainder of that 11,000 number, a mixture of teenagers that run away, get mixed up in drugs and sex trafficking, whether on a semi-voluntary or kind of an end of the road kind of a scenario that they get wrapped up in. But then the other thing about Ohio is, yeah, Ohio's got 1,000 open cases. One place I read it's 468, and then another place I read it's less. But one thing I looked at was the numbers. The state of California is the number one on actual number of children because they have the most population, approximately 3,000 children at any one time in the state of California. Number two is Texas, and then Florida, and then Arizona. But Arizona is an outlier because they have 9 million population. They have over 2,500 missing kids. Ohio has 1,000 missing kids, and we have a population of 11 million. So I think we're about average for the country. But I think there is some very specific things here in Ohio, particularly Toledo and Detroit, that area, where I feel is probably the area where these actual children might be, staged to either go on a train, on a boat, or on a plane internationally. And I think Ohio and that little corner is strategically positioned for international flights out of Detroit, international boat rides to California, and then we have international rail lines that are right there that go across the lake front as well. So there's a lot of areas for smuggling of human people in that particular area. So that's what I've uncovered in part, not to take up too much time, but that's kind of what I've learned for the last few days here.
And that's a lot of homework you did there. And Dr. Looney and Jen and Scott, I'm not sure if I'm having a little bit a hard time hearing you, but we're trying to fix it on the back end. It's going out over YouTube fine, so bear with us. But missing kids in Ohio, specifically, there are more than 1,000 minors reporting missing so far this year. 45 in September alone in the Cleveland, Akron area have gone missing. And that is, as I said, August and September. And the yearly number for Ohio is 18,000. So, Doctor Detective Troy Looney, to you, what do we need to know about the reporting here specifically? Because is that what's at the crux of the issue? And I know some people are going to say, "Oh, these guys are hopping on this story." Well, this has made headlines everywhere because it's very important. If in fact the reporting is okay, and this number is still incredibly high, but what do you say? I mean, for the number of children missing as reported, what are the reasons, if you can identify them?
So thank you, Joel. So again, as Scott mentioned, a large number for Ohio, a large percentage of these reports show the kids have actually been recovered. And I think you mentioned 95 to 97%. I talk with detectives, and we keep a daily active missing list of kids and adults. So as of yesterday, our numbers were showing roughly 38 minors on the actively reported missing, and those detectives identified this as these numbers as all being runaways, essentially, or habitual runaways. Again, not trying to blame the kids. There could be several factors such as home life, foster kids, custody issues, or neglect. A large host of elements that factor in. But talking with the detectives, again, these numbers were all reported as active runaways and actively missing people, essentially, again, including the missing homeless that is also integrated into the numbers. So looking at the factors and reasons, again, the reporting system, can we do better in reporting? Absolutely. Is it any particular agency or entity's fault, parents or law enforcement? Not necessarily. I think it's just a matter of keeping up with what's going on, identifying where we can factor in and work collectively together. Again, some of these kids are habitual runaways where there's repeat reporting. So you may have a child that is recovered the same day, takes off again that night or the next day, and it has to be documented. There's mandatory reporting also for parents and foster parents that's required. Again, one child's too many, and this is a good reason for this discussion. Looking at the list as of yesterday, I also inquired with detectives how many of these 38 minors have suspicious circumstances. They said none. How many are repeat offenders or repeat runaways? They said all of them actually, and that doesn't account for the missing homeless. So we're actively tracking on a daily basis. It's updated daily, twice a day even, to determine where these kids, let's bring them back home safely. It's about their safety first and about just securing their well-being.
Well said, Doctor. And left to right here, you see some of the missing children: Mackenzie Miller, Malachi
Yes.
Herring, Tania Lundy, and then on the bottom, Chris Anderson, Diamond Buchanan, and Jahael Ramirez. So, um, by the way, this is Tiffany here. I lived in Cleveland for a few years. This is horrifying, and you hardly hear anything about it. To you, Jen Coffindaffer, um, you just heard the doctors say, he spoke to his, the detectives in this unit, and they are repeat runaways. What about the fact that a lot of these kids run away over and over again in terms of how it factors in to the reporting?
Then, I mean, the stats then get skewed and then it looks sort of worse than it is. I mean, we all agree that one is too many. And certainly to highlight the missing in this country is long overdue. And so it's a wonderful thing that it's being highlighted. But when we're talking about runaways, really it's so really mind-boggling to find out what is going on that you have 10, 11, 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds running away from home. So I think it's an issue that needs to be looked at so closely by social services, not just law enforcement, but what is really going on in these homes.
And Scott, Columbus in Ohio happens to lead the state with reports of missing children. That's according to the Ohio Attorney General's office. But Scott, you and I are close in age. You live in Cleveland. I'm just wondering if you've heard this as a problem on the ground where you live. I mean, is it an issue? Do people talk about this?
Well, it's a thing people talk about on a regular basis. I know certainly on the local Cleveland news, there's one station that I know, Channel 8, Fox 8. Good friend of mine, news reporter Ed Gallup, works there, uh, and they have a segment on there every night on the news of, I apologize to her. I can't remember her name right now. I don't have a lot. I don't watch a whole lot of TV, but she's a victim of the Ariel Castro kidnapping that was famous here in Ohio maybe a decade or so ago. And she now is an on-air personality who has a missing kids segment every night on the news. So I think it is something that the news community focuses on, but and I don't want to raise a negative tone about the legacy media, but we have some issues with regard, and I know I'm talking like I'm cooking pasta over here, but uh, we've got some issues with regard to how the news media reports these cases. Uh, a case of that little girl in New York last night that ran away or was on a bike ride around a campground, and then she was gone for 12 hours, and they found her in the cupboard of a camper 2 miles off the track. It was all over the news, front headlines everywhere. Cute little white girl that gets front page pub all day. Look at John Benny Ramsey, front page pub all day. Gabby Petito, front page all day. But then when we have kids of color or unfortunate means, poverty where their families don't have this well of support to urge the media, you know, uh, I think those cases get underreported. And I think that, not just Cleveland, or Ohio, but in all of the United States, we should care about the kids that are most at risk, because the kids from the wealthy suburban homes, yeah, every once in a while that happens. They get kidnapped every once in a while, but those are not by far the majority of the cases, but that gets the majority of the coverage.
Yeah.
Just an
Art
observation.
Art Nixie, by the way, saying 97,000 missing people, which I read at the beginning, is over all time. That's not the way it's worded, and if it is, it's worded very strangely. Um, so I'll have to dig into that. And Dr. Looney, I don't know if you know if that 97,000 figure, that's according to the National Crime Information Center, that there are 97,000 total active missing people, but maybe it is over the entirety of record keeping. I don't know. Do you happen to know, Jen?
I believe the person who called in or rated is correct, and it's kind of like this 1,000 missing person, that it's really over, the time frame. And again, it's about reporting. And the only reason I think it is important to really hone in on these statistics, Joel, is because we want to really work with truth and facts and understand what is really happening dynamically with the missing. And if figures are inflated, if it's not made clear that it's from the beginning of record keeping to now, it's not that it's not an important issue, but I think it's important that we understand really what we're dealing with.
And by the way, the Ohio Attorney General, credit to him. I mean, he said one missing child is too many, but he also says here, we know that law enforcement recovers 90% of the children that go missing. Again, with that being said, one kid missing is one too many. I mean, if 1,000 kids are missing in Ohio, we're talking about 100 kids that aren't accounted for. And Art Nixie here is on my case, and I get it, and I appreciate Art Nixie here. Even the DA, whose website got the story started, acknowledged the data was not current, includes anyone called in, but not the resolution. So, Art Nixie, that's why we're doing the show, is to get some clarity on this, and try to understand it better. But I appreciate that. And to you, Dr. Looney, if some of the cases are runaway and quote unquote unruly cases, what does that mean to the overall statistics that we're seeing?
Thank you. So again, what that means to the numbers, as Jennifer mentioned, the data becomes skewed in the sense of reporting, active missing, repeat reports, and again, that just it conflicts with what the perception is versus the reality of how many kids are actually missing. Of course, the numbers are a starting point to understand what needs to be done. I mean, it's a collective effort. It's going to take that effort of community, these types of discussions, social media, and all the above. So we have all of this social media, all these platforms to consider, and we just have to have continue the discussion, continue the efforts to um, provide maybe a different reporting or recovery documentation effort. Again, if there's a child that's missing again and they are recovered the same day, I spoke with detectives also. I understand that you could make 20 calls a day, recover 7 children, and 4 may go back missing again, or they're still actively documented and reported the next day if they have not been found. So, again, a lot of considerations, as I mentioned, maybe foster care, maybe it's neglect. There are reasons why they are actually running away, essentially, or it could be unruly. Again, so we have to identify those things. I agree with Jennifer mentioning some type of mental health component, social component for counseling to tie back into the community effort and the collective effort with law enforcement, social systems, and parents.
Well put. Modine is America's favorite troll. He's usually trolling, but I think this is a serious question. Scott Roeder, I know you love a good conspiracy theory every once in a while, and I don't
Yeah.
want to raise any flags here, but the question is, with so many missing children, is it possible that powerful people are involved in some way? I mean, I think the better question is these numbers, despite the fact that it sounds like the record keeping is a bit skewed for a variety of reasons, it's still a big number. Um, I don't know if you had to guess, Scott Roeder. I mean, we're obviously thinking about Jeffrey Epstein. But
Well,
what do you think is at play here? Do you think it's a combination of bad parenting and kids running away, uh, technology overriding young people's mindset? I don't know. What do you think's at play here?
obviously, we're speculating here, right? Uh, as to trying to have a good conversation about um, well, one, why we had a question earlier. What's going on in these homes, right? That is going to make these kids want to run away. I mean, not everybody. I think that's. I'm going to side with the teenagers on this one because not everybody grows up in a house where you want to be there as a kid. I know. I love my parents and they're wonderful people, still alive, wonderful people. I love them to death. But when I was a kid, I wanted to run away. In fact, I did when I was 15 years old. So, I think a lot of people can relate, to the young people that you feel isolated and you don't, you fit in and you want to get out. And that's an urge teenagers have when they're in a situation they're not happy. They want to get out. And sometimes they get out and they get into a situation where things get out of hand and they start relying upon people that don't have their best interests at heart. And that's where the predators come in, right? We talked about the predators before in the wild. What do those people do? What do these animals do? They look for the least defensible hog with amongst all the hog. You never see a hog get killed, a little baby hog, when the big mom is there, right? Because that mom will kill a lion, even though it's half the size. I think same thing with kids and predators on the street here. They see a kid who's defenseless, and they become predators. And I think it's a combination of this teenage angst, uh, bad situations, and then we have a land that's filled with predators.
It's
So
8 o'clock.
that's kind of my take.
Um, Jen, we did a recent show about this young girl who went missing from Chandler, Arizona, and wound up in Montana with a much older man, and she's now legal. And we had a guest on then who said, and Scott was kind of alluding to this just now, that the predators used to lurk, do you want some candy in their car? They drive by in the van, but now they're right on that technology in the child's bedroom. How big an X factor is that in terms of children who go missing? The fact that these predators, like Scott said, are literally on your kids' tablets in their bedroom.
Joel, it's so funny. We must be connecting mentally because the entire time I was just hoping you would bring that up. It's all about, I think, why we're seeing a huge number of missing initially for sure is because of the internet, is because of gaming, is because that these predators are now in their bedroom and kids are spending hours and hours and hours on games and on YouTube and that's their world now. I have a teenager and I can tell you he spends an inordinate amount of time on his devices. But, he also has to get straight A's and has to play 3 sports. So as long as he does all that, I let him have his tablet time. But the bottom line is that puts those people in his bedroom with him potentially if you don't do the proper safeguards.
And doctor, I'd love for you to weigh in on that. I have 3 kids. The youngest is 4. He's a total tablet addict already. I'm trying to pry it out of his hands. But what is your advice to parents whose kids, I mean, that's just the age we live in now. It's so difficult. But what's your advice to parents whose kids are that tablet is their new pacifier?
Again, thank you. And as Jennifer said, I'm going to attach to her statement of the internet, the social media, the connectivity, essentially. So we have to basically become nosy once again in our kids' lives. I understand we want to be their friends. We want to give them a voice, right, as they need, of course. We want to rear them in accordance with becoming young adults responsible, and all the above. But as Jennifer mentioned, I'm sorry, I called you Jen. We have to integrate and we have to engage with the connectivity because we don't know a lot of their discussions they're having. We don't know essentially, or they may not know who their friends are, who they think their friends are. As Scott mentioned, these predators are actively pursuing their gaming. They're on the social media, and just about every day I see kids walking. They're actually crossing the street on their phone, not even paying attention, whether there's the green or the hand to go or stop. So they're fully immersed in the technology. And again, this is a wonderful start of discussion. This is actually much needed on a continuous basis. And we have to treat this as an epidemic, even if the numbers are not reflecting that, because we can't afford to have any of our kids unsafe, accessible, and prey, as Scott mentioned.
And Jody Johnson writes, Scott, we need more data researchers. Also, I heard someone here say that people don't report when someone is found, which I've heard as well. By the way, apparently Australia has about 38,000 missing a year under 18. That's a significant number because they're a much smaller country population wise. But what about the idea of adding more data researchers? Because it seems like the data is very skewed.
Well, I mean, I think the one thing we don't have a shortage of in the world today is data researchers, data mining, data this, data that, right? Because data is the new money. It's the new Bitcoin. It's the new cash for play. If you have somebody's data, you have predictability over their behavior better than they know themselves, from what these AI people seem to tell me. So you can look at, you sit, talk to your phone, or you're walking down the street, and you say something like, I really should fix that drywall hole in the basement. And then the next thing I know, I pick up my phone, advertisement for drywall in my Amazon bag, right? So data is can be controlled if there is an interest to put the minds together to do it. But unfortunately, the reality of the situation is the talented people who are using this data to have predictability models. Uh, they're doing it for money only, right? So this is a benevolent cause that you would need to recruit some very intelligent AI people to say, okay, these people are more at risk. I mean, if we're looking at some kind of implementing a plan to use AI to identify at-risk children for online predators, something like that, I'm sure that can be algorithmed up. But this one is for a fee, right? Silicon Valley, you're not going to see an advertisement for that on the Super Bowl, but you're going to see an advertisement for sports betting and the AI and the intuitive things that's going to, and then being pampered with the ads. So I guess the point is the technology is there, the expertise is there. It's just, is there a desire there to implement some kind of a protection that's not a control mechanism, but rather is an educational open source tool so that we all can see where the pitfalls are, not just a couple of people who are crunching the numbers off to the side that could give you the spread sheet. I think some kind of open sourcing, red hot points of, hey, these are dangerous spots. Don't go over here at this time of day. Discord is dangerous over here, or don't do this on this app, or some kind of a. We have that technology for hackers, right? Did this project with the Irish law group where we did an animation to show the web attacks coming from Russia and China and all this stuff into America and spear phishing attempts and all this stuff. So it's all trackable, and these people who have fake profiles that are talking to people, those are trackable. You can identify those who those people are and shut them down if they don't have a some kind of a an authentication identification as part of their avatar. They could be anybody, and then those should be questioned and set aside. No, we're talking, you know, computer science here, which is not my expertise. I'm a crime scene guy, but this seems like that would make sense to me. Something like that, maybe.
That's interesting. The whole notion of open sourcing, kind of like Waze is for directions. Chief John
Yeah.
Majoy, yeah, he's the president of the Cleveland Family Center for Missing Children and Adults. He's been very vocal against sort of the viral reporting on this. He says these headlines and wordsmithing can create such panic and give a misleading account of the truth. As we have seen, many of these cases are runaway teens. Such does not diminish the concerns of these cases because one child missing is one too many. So he's saying the same thing. However, law enforcement actively investigates these cases and dedicates resources to help bring the children home safely. And we know from Dr. Detective Troy Loonie that law enforcement obviously is working this. I wanted to bring in a kind of a face to all of this, and that would be a young guy named Keshaun Williams. Go ahead, Dr. Looney.
Sorry, so okay. So essentially, yeah, I was following what you were saying, just thinking in terms of the face or the context of that. And I like what Scott mentioned as far as integrating the technology, open source. Again, as you mentioned, we have all the data, and it's just a matter of engaging and finding a way to specify and narrow this down and just change the focus of interest, even if it be a cyber task force or a portion of the existing task forces to, again, like ICAC and other agencies across the board, including FBI and so forth. So it's just a matter of identifying resources for that and engaging the time and efforts to tap into the communications.
Hey, can I shoot down my own idea?
For it, Scott.
Like I just was thinking, like, okay, let's say this is some kind of a ways thing where I love that idea, by the way. I'm thinking about that from a tangible application. You could integrate some kind of, child safety software into like a ways mapping thing where, say
Yes.
you could plug in there, okay, these are known sexual predators, bing, 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 put a little glowing arrow, boom, boom, stay away from these zones. This is a high crime zone, stay away from over here. But then, I could see communities being, like, hey, don't, that the Chamber of Commerce from certain cities probably wouldn't like that, right? So I'm sure there's probably problems with it. But I love the visual of using a Waze map technology and integrating some type of human safety thing. I mean, they do it with Snapchat, they do it with all different things, right? So why can't they integrate it into some kind of a map that has multi-purpose, like a family ways, right? Like maybe you could call it family ways. We could crowdsource that family ways, where we put in all these predators in there and then put in hot zones for dangerous neighborhoods, time zones. Hey, is your kid, remember that program back? I remember when I was a kid, they had this thing on every celebrity in the world came on the TV at 9 o'clock. It's 9 o'clock. Do you know where your kid is?
On Fox, it
Remember
was a
that?
Fox station.
Okay.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
it's
That's
got
Yeah.
to
So
be
that's excellent.
fair, right?
Go ahead.
Go ahead,
Yes,
Dr. Looney.
excellent point. And you're right. I'm sorry. Technology is the gift and the curse, but it can be created because let's face it, we've heard of algorithm. That is just a set of protocols. And as you, with technology integrated and with open source elements and so forth. So just as you mentioned, Scott, with you can talk about drywall and you have the ad or commercial. The same existing technologies just has to be repurposed for this cause. And again, the links for National Center of Missing and Exploited Children and all of the entities just have to, again, come together as we all do work in collaboration already. And when we have articles like this or awareness, this actually is going to further the cause for safety. That's what it should be about.
Jen, I wanted to get your comment on this before you have to bounce over to the competing network. H. Heineman, some are lured away by human traffickers and are viewed as runaways, but are actually held against their will. There are human trafficking posters all over the Ohio highway rest areas. Obviously, there are a gazillion major highways that do run through Ohio. How serious is the issue of child trafficking? And again, Ohio is the fourth worst in terms of statistics in the nation. But what can we do about human trafficking?
Trafficking is a huge issue. Fortunately, the FBI, the U.S. Marshals, the federal authorities are really starting to put a lot of resources into this. and the U.S. Attorney's Office have made it a high priority, and we're starting to see these huge takedowns. I know I was just involved with a story yesterday about a huge takedown, and it's a very significant situation that's been going on. And unfortunately, with our border crisis, it's only going to get worse because you have all these juveniles, all these children coming across the border, some with parents, some without parents, and that makes them so completely vulnerable. As Scott mentioned, they're the vulnerable, that are looking, and then you have the predators that are all around them. So it's pretty frightening. I did want to mention something though before I have to bounce, and that is at the root of all of these runaways, though, are the parents even home? We live in this society now where you've got mom working, you've got dad working, and nobody is really home monitoring, especially a lot of these teenagers, because it's an economic situation. It just can't be afforded. And so I think really somehow uh, having a family network somehow to help keep these kids wanting to be home and keeping an eye on these kids is really important. And then finally, I just wanted to end with everybody asked, what can I do? And this was something I was never involved in until the Gabby Petito story really just wrapped me up in missing children advocacy and the missing as a whole, Joel. And you can get on, it doesn't matter what your social media is, whether it's Twitter or TikTok, and help put the faces and names of these children out there. If everyone did that, imagine the amount of exposure these kids would get, and hopefully somebody would see something and they could be found. So I just wanted to end with that.
Thank you, Jen. And I met Jen at CrimeCon, a very beautiful person on the inside and out. So thank you, Jen, for joining us. We will have you back again soon. And tell News Nation we say hello. I'll give them a free plug. How about that?
Too.
Till next time.
All right, till next time, Jen. Thank you. Shaq Oatmeal, the best name in all of social media and podcasting, says some parents are so wrapped up in their own lives that they have no idea what their kids are doing, which is exactly what Jen was just saying. I want to put a kind of a face to all of this. Space Coast, if we have Keshaun Williams' photo, the family of 15-year-old Keshaun Williams is among those now coping with the uncertainty. They're trying to track his last known steps. He was last seen in June, actually on June 20th, following a house party. And you see his missing poster there and a picture of him. Not the greatest photo, but that's what they put out on the missing poster. But it was following a house party. His whereabouts remain unknown since June 20th. There have been searches by law enforcement. There was actually an Amber Alert issued for him, and he still has not been found. A quick backstory. Cleveland police detective, a guy named Ryan Corrigan, said that the teen had called his aunt late that night, and that was the last outgoing call or text made from his phone. And he called her crying, the detective said. She said, "Hey, it's okay, just come home." He said he didn't want to come home yet. And friends reported seeing him a few days later. He was beaten up in the back of a vehicle at a gas station a few blocks away. That's what prompted this Amber Alert. Dr. Detective Looney, I mean, how troubling is that? This sounds like a legitimate case or something, sinister happened here. We don't know. He's been missing since June 20th. He was beaten up. Where do you go with this?
Again, Joel. So looking at this is terrible, and it being an Amber Alert again. I know it's been broadcast, and I guess essentially we have to go back to um, friends, family, associates, the location, last seen, a location where he was living, or he didn't want to go back to really examine the root of every element involved. What was home life like? What's the reasons why he didn't want to go back? Why was he beat up? Again, a thorough and investigative deep dive into, the tracking and tracing again with social media, electronic devices, and hopefully friends and associates will be willing to come forward and give some light or some kind of indicators as to what can we do and what was going on in Keshaun's life. So what was actually happening, and again, as everything is documented and there's trails, ways to track evidence and data, we just have to really get into this and on a strict and nonstop basis, a tireless effort essentially to look into what can we do and how can we backtrace and determine whereabouts and what may have happened. So
I'm just curious, doctor, how would this weigh on you? I mean, you're an active investigator. Let's say this was your case. This is someone that could be our child, obviously. How would it weigh on you?
it's troubling again. So everyone has a different approach, and as Scott mentioned, there's other factors, and um, you have to really care about people to help people first and foremost. So really, it's not about I'm tired, it's the end of my shift. It's about you know you have to put the time and put the work in and engage. I'm not saying it's not being done, but I just mean that it does take the extra effort, just even a little extra effort, to get results and make a difference. So if this means pulling kids aside, friends and family, I mean, and just really having a off the record discussion, even sometimes, to get to finding, finding the missing persons, right? Finding Keshaun. I mean, it's about safety. It's about identifying, even if it has to be some kind of agreement to protect him first, bring him home, and then deal with the issues and factors as a result. Deal with that after we have him secure.
Um, and you see here, Liz W with a super sticker as a retired data analyst, garbage in, garbage out causes scrubbing and reporting discrepancies, even in research results. And of course, Scott was saying, it's the world of mining data, which is true. That's what we're living in. I was curious about Amber Alerts being triggered, and for a missing child case to qualify as an Amber Alert, there's some strict guidelines. There has to be credible information suggesting that the child under 18 was forcibly or intentionally taken or lured away, and the law enforcement agency has to believe the child is in serious danger. There also has to be enough of a description of the child and or their alleged abductor and their vehicle to share with the public to help find them. So there's kind of a high threshold in order to trigger an Amber Alert. But Scott Roeder, to you, and pardon me, I don't even know if you have kids or not. My guess is you do. And I think you probably mentioned it, and I was busy doing some other things here on this interesting evening. But I don't know, what kind of parenting suggestions do you have? You're a no nonsense guy, and part of this issue is definitely parenting. I'm at fault. My kids are all addicted to their tablets, but sometimes it's easier to let them be that way. What would you suggest? Because you're dealing with that.
If my kids heard me get asked this question, and they're like, "You want his advice on how to be a father?" I think that I mean, raising kids now. I would like to make an announcement. I just found out I'm going to be a grandfather. I'm
Oh,
having a boy. Yeah,
congrats. We say
yeah.
mazel tov here.
Thank you.
Congrats to you.
Congratulations, yes.
Yeah. So I'm taking a look at this. From a standpoint of I mean I have three children, but they're all adults now. My youngest daughter is 25, my 27, who's the new father, and then 29, my oldest son. Um, but now that I'm going to have a little grandbaby on the way, I mean, you look at these things differently, right? Of who's going to be at risk. You know, I think being involved, is important. Caring, and then limiting and not being a friend. I was not a great friend to my kids because they needed to be scared that you know something was bad was going to happen to them if they didn't participate with my dictatorship, and it was clearly a dictatorship is my way or, shut up. I'll make another one that looks just like you, except this one won't be stupid, you know? Kind of an attitude with your children. It doesn't mean you don't love them. Of course, I love my children. I drove myself in front of a bus right now for my unborn grandson. And I think that's it, right? You just have to care about your family enough that you would jump in front of a bus for them. I don't know, who am I to teach other people or say anything, even a comment. I think we're all lucky to be alive. We're all lucky to be healthy. Um, but there's a lot of people that are not lucky. There's a lot of people that are living much different lives than Dr. Loonie and myself and you, Joel. Uh, so it's those people that we need to think about how do we make their lives more accessible so that they care more about their lives as much as we care about our lives, right?
Yeah, well put. Consider yourself lucky if you're just alive and breathing. Little Monster 1325 here. Hardly any police budgets, Dr. Looney, or even the FBI budgets have much directed towards human trafficking. Most of their budgets go toward drugs, etc. Human trafficking needs more funding in every department. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. I do know there's a large amount of assets that are seized from the drug trafficking. So that should be funneled towards this effort specifically. I do know there are agencies that use seizures of drug monies and assets for training. So if we can use it for training, we can use it for um, human trafficking as well. I mean, this is a huge, huge problem, and it's not always a large organization. It could be as small as one or two individuals that are facilitating the efforts and creating a hub in various locations. So it's going to take a collective effort. And as Jennifer was mentioning, it's going to take the community. It takes that, and maybe we can integrate something as such as even advertisements um, to post pictures, posters of kids, right? Bring awareness. Again, I like the idea of leveraging the data to um, create the awareness, create the, if it, we can consider it an advertisement, right? But it's still awareness. It's still part of the discussion. And again, not just when there's a article that's published or posted, but consistently. It's about consistency and it's about just being diligent. But as Scott said, a lot of the home lives, all of our home lives are different. I was a latchkey kid growing up. Both my parents worked, both now deceased, but I walked home. I had a key around my neck. I let myself in, and I had to wait till they got home or someone got home. But again, that fear factor was there. Things are a lot different now, and again, technology is a gift and a curse as far as the kids understanding, learning a lot faster, um, as they're also creative, highly creative, and highly advanced, more advanced than we were as children. So it's going to take the funneling of those seizures towards this focus, human trafficking and missing and exploitation.
I know Dr. Looney's parents are looking down very proudly at him with all that he has accomplished. Again, he's the only doctor detective that we've had on STS. We've had a
I appreciate that.
gazillion best guests, so he holds that. I
With a
hold that.
doctor comes before. That's the first. If you got to go with just one, you're going with doc, right?
That's fine. I've been called worse. So
If I really like a doctor, I just say, what's up, doc? I
What's up?
mean, I
right,
feel like
right,
that's a
right.
universal, right?
That works.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I know,
it all
I'm
works.
actually,
Yeah,
if I'm a detective and a doc, I'm throwing out both right at the same time.
yeah.
Doc, detective. But
gotcha,
Meg
gotcha.
P, talking about technology, I mean, we have this. By the way, I have my kids air tag. They wear a little watch with an air tag in it at school. My
Yes,
wife set that up, but I got
Yeah.
Ethel Bug, my boxer's also air tag because she likes to jump over the
oh wow.
fences, and it's in a waterproof collar. So I'm taking care of my kids and my dog as well, making sure that she doesn't go anywhere. Um, Dr. Looney, you were kind enough to actually send over some questions. Usually we don't always do that. There are times for full disclosure, but usually I generate most of the questions. And we talked about this a little bit, but you were asking, are there any programs or social media avenues to consider to help with missing children awareness? And you mentioned ICAC and national centers. What is the ICAC, and what do you recommend in that regard?
Again, it's an acronym for Internet Crimes Against Children. So essentially, it's an organization, a task force. So collectively, to bring together multi-jurisdictional agencies to work in collaboration, and not just for um, internet crimes, internet related crimes against children. But this is an all hands on deck effort. So essentially, when there are suspicious circumstances, such as with Keshaun, Amber Alerts, and what have you, this is all hands on deck. Any information that's shared or distributed that looks unusual, or if it looks like it's something of an abduction case or a custody case or interference with custody, all hands on deck. So it's a whole entirely new, different approach taken, an effort to approach that investigation. And can we do that with all of them? We can think in that aspect, but you require the facts and the data or some kind of additional data to show this is unusual or something doesn't just feel right. This is outside the norm of the child's behavior or adult's behavior also.
This question is right back at you, Dr. Looney, from Mind of Monsters. From a law enforcement point of view, why is it like pulling teeth to get an Amber Alert? Do you have a simple answer for that?
Of course, there's no simple answer for that. Again, there's criterion to trigger the Amber Alert, and there's no easy answer, of course, for any of this. But it's going to take, again, community, collective effort. If you see something, say something. There are agencies such as the National Crimes that take donations. All the task force, local, federal, state, county law enforcement that work in collaboration. So it's an ongoing effort. This is not something that's a one time. I mean, you can donate on a one time basis, but my understanding also you can donate monthly. And again, it's just a matter of sharing the information. Social media is free essentially. So we can share that, have the discussions, create focus groups, create the, again, mental health component also, which already exists as well. So a lot of agencies that exist just have to bring the awareness and provide access or the links to that. So again, back to the data. It's about the links, the connectivity, the awareness, the discussion. Ongoing.
Well put. And a couple more things I will begin to wrap. Thank you, Mick Spunky, or MC Spunky, as I call you, but I guess it's Mick Spunky. The COE and I were discussing that, believe it or not, the other night. I guess it is Mick Spunky. Trying to help keep STS Nation train a chugging. Appreciate that. Again, you guys can help through Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. If you can't do that, please give us 5 stars on Apple. It goes a long way, believe it or not. And then look at this flowing in from Stephanie. Congratulations to Scott. Congratulations to Scott. Congratulations to Scott. Congratulations to Scott. Who is Scott? A podcaster? Scott, if you would see, if you rolled those sleeves up, he's a tat-sleeved artist of a badass man, is how I would describe him. He founded the Evidence Room. He does crime scene reconstruction. And he works in concert with people like Dr. Looney to reenact crimes. And he did it for a pretty well-known guy named Oscar Pistorius, who's serving a sentence for murder in South Africa. So Scott Roeder has grown that business into something to behold. So he's not just a podcaster. He's the founder of the Evidence Room and an all-around good guy.
Myself a professional podcaster. If anybody gone over to Crime Scene Time Machine and listened to my podcast, you'll understand it's not a very polished podcast. And sometimes it's not even about crime scenes. A lot of times we're just talking about UFOs. And, sometimes I'm talking about Neil deGrasse Tyson, or, we're doing an episode on this or that or whatever. So, but it's an ad-free situation. We're not taking any money. It's just for kind of a little bit of catharsis. But the real job, Evidence Room, we're right now we're working on a case in London. We're working on several cases in Australia. But the thing I wanted to talk to you about, Dr. Looney, is for example, like when we were talking about that Waze program, like if it's something that developed, I've found historically, being a private consultant doing what I do, that on active cases, law enforcement is sometimes resistant on taking any assistance or in collaboration, even at the request of families at times. I understand for integrity of investigation and so forth, but is there a way to bridge, private consulting with law enforcement in voluntary ways that it could genuinely, add some kind of a benefit I think, and also working with the public, moms and dads on, where are these kids at 9 o'clock? Let's start tracking them down. Like as a parent app, would law enforcement want to open source that kind of a thing for this limited purpose of like missing kids and stuff? Is that something that you think would have legs?
So excellent question, Scott. Thank you so much for. I was already thinking along those lines. So essentially, what we're finding in, I teach other courses and what have you, and it's all about, law enforcement, as you know, is resistant to training. Oh, more training, more training. But that is required. That's required for all of us. Training for law enforcement, training for parents, training for the community, training for agencies, and so forth. So we have to become, again, lifelong learners. So what that does, what that means is, yes, there's room for the introduction of the crime analysis, I'm going to call that, essentially because that's what's required, the data analysis. So it could be that WAYS type program or some other program that's developed or created. In fact, that is already that's been in the back of my mind for discussion and development. And there are training components and other entities that offer free training resources for the public. I work for the University of Akron also as an instructor and a senior lecturer, and we're integrating and developing curriculum and training for the public, for law enforcement, for students, for parents, and so forth, the entire community at large. Again, it's going to take that discussion, it's going to take those kind of resources, and this is free training essentially. So there's
Yeah, and
different dynamics.
Yeah, I think you're right. Having law enforcement be involved in the schools, have that approachable,
Yeah,
I'm not wearing a gun, law enforcement. I'm
right,
detective, but I don't have a
right,
gun. We're talking,
right.
having that relationship with the moms and dads is going to make reporting easier, right? They're going
Yes,
to they're
yes,
going to
it is.
want to approach because they see it at the grocery store, they see it at the mall. I think having that home officer rule, I think that was implemented in Ohio maybe 10,
Yes,
15 years ago. You have to live in the district where you serve,
yes.
was a great help to kind of help integrate law enforcement with everyday people. Because you see the police officer that's giving you the ticket at the grocery store, and if your kid goes missing, these people are approachable. We're a community again, held
Absolutely.
together by it's not pushed out by the cops, but the cops are part of us every day.
Yeah.
I think that's where it's got to go, right?
Absolutely, yeah, we're all human, right? And we all put our
Yeah,
pants on the same way. So, regardless of whoever it is, so yeah, we do have
yeah,
to show that we have that caring factor. And again, as I said, to help one another, we have to be genuinely concerned and genuine
yeah.
about what that means. So, if nothing else, let's do it for the love of the kids and love of safety and security for the children, all of us as well.
By the way,
And then
everyone's
it's
making fun of me for air tagging my boxer. I thought everyone was
mhm.
doing that, but I must be the only one. Uh, you don't air tag your dog, Scott? I know you have a dog, Scott.
I got my dog Dexter, but I actually a funny story. Of my friend had an air tag. I was down visiting him in Pompano Beach with the dog, and the air tag fell out of the collar. I thought it was my air tag from like my backpack, so I take it, and anyway, I'm flying home. It's like, you steal my dog? They saw the dog flying across the country. Yeah, so I, I digitally stole somebody's dog by accident, so that was kind of funny.
That's the downside of technology. Mind of Monsters here says there are over 200 missing kids in New York on the National Missing and Exploited Children website alone. Why do we not see the governor involved in these cases? Um, Dr. Looney, I mean, does it need to go up the ranks? The attorney general in Ohio was, putting their 2 cents in. Does this, when we're dealing with the issue of missing children and actual missing children, not just some, discrepancies in reporting quirks, does it have to go that high? Do they need to get involved in finding these children?
So essentially, thank you, Joel. So yeah, what comes to mind for that is, yes, they need to get involved, but we also can almost develop our own influencers because just like media and television, the social media has become more powerful, as we all know. The reporting has become a lot faster, right? So we'd have cases we're actively working, whereas we try to have that discretion and respect for the families to at least deliver any kind of news in person, even if it's a minor assault or injury. We like to talk with them, go to the house, deliver it in person. But now with technology, they know they're on the scene before we even get notified and we're called. So we have to leverage that to introduce legislation, introduce the awareness, introduce the discussions with the higher ups so that let's just call it what it is. Let's put pressure to provide solutions. So if that means calling, letters, and so forth, emails, text, whatever, TikTok videos, right? A lot of people spend hours and hours on TikTok and the social media, but this could be as simple as integration of an ad that's a missing persons poster and so forth to add to the policy in terms of service, right? So imagine how that can bring awareness and bridge the gap with federal, state, local, and government entities and government politicians, right? So if we make it a requirement for the policy, we can't ignore it.
By the way, hey, Mona says maybe Joel has dial-up Wi-Fi. It's possible the way things are going on my end tonight. I'm gonna have to figure that out. I remember that phone line, that whatever it was.
Oh yeah,
Mhm.
the disc
Yeah,
could get 1,000 hours. Yeah,
yeah,
Oh,
I
just
remember
don't
that.
be a
And
right. FEMA
McSpunky's
emergency
giving me
alert.
a hard time. He says, "Jesus, take the wheel from Joel." McSpunky, I'm doing like 19 things at once simultaneously, so give me a break.
Hey, Joel, you want
Hey,
me to spice things up a little bit?
yeah, I want you to Scott, I want you to
oh, you
respond
were
to this. This commenter
okay.
says, "I'm from Ohio, so glad I got out alive." Would you like to respond to that?
Oh, yeah, man, baby, run, run, run faster. Yeah, man, yeah, get out. Yeah, get out. It is bad news here. I am being attacked as we speak. I gotta hold on. Let me get my bat out. Get out of here.
Scott Duffy, what were you gonna say, Scott Duffy? I mean, not Scott Duffy, Scott Roeder. Scott Duffy's on every Friday. My bad, but
Gonna say was, one of the things about getting eyeballs on the subject matter, right? People need to care about missing kids, right? So there to leverage, so maybe we leverage a conspiracy theory, right? Epstein Island. Is that a conspiracy theory anymore, Joel? I mean, is Epstein Island, it's not, is that a conspiracy? Can we talk about that? I don't want to get on
you
alive.
can say whatever you want, Scott
I
Roeder.
can't,
I
okay,
can't, but
that's
you
my
can.
permission.
Just
But
send the hate mail to Scott Roeder. That's all.
send it right over. No, because I'm actually researching a podcast on. I don't know if I'm going to do it or not, but on Marina Abramovich, right? And the kind of influences she's now the Ukrainian ambassador. Yeah, I don't know if you know about this person. It's an interesting story, but it's all connected in a weird way to just kind of a culture where I think maybe a small group of predators was we know elites, right? People that took that trip down to that. I hear it's going to be a resort now. That'll be nice. Put in a couple of slides. I mean, so yeah, I don't know. There might be maybe you can leverage that story to get pub for the real story. Because I know that's a big story. Matter of fact, it's such a big story you really can't even talk about it. That's why I'm dancing around because I don't want to I don't want to get shot. But there, in certain circles, that is a story. Leverage that. When there was a big movie out recently, right, where that caused a lot of controversy. I didn't see it. I don't really follow media and stuff, but I understand that there was a big controversy. And why didn't that maybe instead of it, that should have gone toward, well, let's look at the kids in our local neighborhood. What's going on here? Right. Because you have these big national stories, but I think all that matters is your personal neighborhood. Right. So take the warnings from the stories to implement them into your personal neighborhoods. Right. And it takes more than one person, to do that. I'm joking around a little bit about that other stuff, but sometimes maybe that's a headline. You sandbag them with that headline, but let's look at it for real here locally. A lot of people can speculate about what happens to these national cases, but you can't do anything about it. It's above us. It's a line. We got to live our life on that C line, right?
Well put, gentlemen. On that note, we are going to have to start to wrap up. Special thanks to Jen Coffindaffer for her career in federal law enforcement as a retired FBI agent. Scott Roeder, he's an internationally recognized evidence specialist, founder of the Evidence Room. He's consulted over 1,500 cases. And of course, we've got Dr. Detective Troy Loonie, a PhD. You don't hear that very often. Doctor detective. He began his career in Akron, Ohio. He's lived there his entire life. And he's been working in the department for 30 years, since 1992. I think he says he has 2 more years to go. So huge
Yes.
shout out to both of you. And until next
Thank you.
time, thank you. Love you, America.
Thank you.
Love you, Cleveland. And love you, Akron. Until next time.
Thank you. Pleasure meeting you.